What's up, everybody? We are here today to talk about how to build a simple image resizing API in just under 100 lines of code. This is the blog post that we recently published, and I will be doing a video tutorial of it. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comment section or reach out on our Discord. We have a whole help channel where you can ask questions and things like that. So yeah, let's get started. Today I'll be doing things differently. I'm going to be doing all my coding in our deploy playground. And if you haven't played around with our playground, it's pretty cool. It's basically a text editor inside Deno deploy. And things will just deploy on save. And let's just test it out. Here we go. So here is our deploy playground, and I have a serve, and I'm just returning a response hello world. You see it's right here, and if you also choose to go to the URL directly, you can see there it is, hello world. Alright, so the first step we want to do in our API is we'll set up the server. Let's update this standard library to 173, and this is totally fine. It's important, keep in mind, it's important to always have the version number when you are importing like this, because by default the script is going to go for the latest version, and if you run the script in some other environment, some other context, it's going to pull the latest version, and sometimes that might break logic of your code. So best practice is to always have the version number in your import statement. So to manipulate images, we'll use ImageMagick, and if you haven't used ImageMagick, it's a very powerful binary that allows you to manipulate images, add text, scale things, crop them, whatever, draw stuff on top. It's pretty powerful and flexible, and there actually is ImageMagick on /x. So here we go. There's actually two, but this is the popular one, so let's pick on that one. Yeah, by the same person who created Lume and maintains Lume. They ported over ImageMagick to be a TypeScript module on Deno. So yeah, basically we'll just use that in our code. So we can just import ImageMagick, magic geometry. And we can just click on, actually we can just do this. And that should be fine. And before we can use ImageMagick, actually let me just no. I was trying to change my import. Oh wow, okay. I was trying to change my tabs to be 2 spaces. But look at that. That's 4 spaces. Alright, that's fine. And let's save this. And it's going to deploy it. It should work. Yep, looks good. before we can start using image magic, we have to use this await initialize image magic statement. And you know, this is just like a constructor basically to set up the client that will interface with the image magic binary. Great. So the first thing we want to do in our serve function, and let's just make this an async function. Right, and you know, the first thing that we're going to do is, well, let's talk about the API real quick, because the API is going to be all done via parameters on the query string. So to give you an example, it'll look something like, you know, we'll do something where it's like, you know, after the question mark, it'll be image, and, you know, we'll have like a URL of an image. Here we'll just use the artwork of Deno city, JPEG. We'll pass it the width, and we'll pass it the height. And you know, right now it's not going to do anything, but that is how we will send parameters and arguments to the API, is through the query string. So the first step really is just to parse the query string, right? And we can do that using the request URL, which is a URL object. So in the request, yeah, we can do right, and let's just see if we can return that. I guess every single time I have to deploy, it takes 6 seconds for me to be able to see my changes. There you go. Look at that. So using this URL object, we can parse this URL off the request, and this URL object, let's see if we can look into it. Basically, it's this URL interface, and you know, people are always like, oh, why don't you have this stuff on the Deno documentation? Well, you know, because it's web compliant and stuff, it is on MDM web docs. You can check it out here, so you can see there's there's like these attributes that are part of this interface that we can use. But here we go. So we'll be able to parse the query strings off this with search params. So we can do stuff like image equals URL.search param.get. Right, and we can also do const height equals the same thing. Log this. So you see here in the logs, we can see the image is returned as well as the height and the width. And that's all done through search params. And it's basically just acts like a getter and setter for the query strings. So now we know how to do this part. The next section is basically the next section basically is just parsing the params, checking the params, right? And then, yeah, let's just focus on that first. So what we can do is we can create a new function called parseParams. And, you know, this function is really just going to get our image and our width and height. Copy this over, and what we want to do is in here we can just call parseParams, and what we want to return basically is just an object, like, you know, image, height, width. Like that's what we want params to be. So image, height, width. So we can add a few things here. Basically, you know, just to do some checking to make sure that the parameters make sense and are reasonable. So we can just say if that like height or width don't exist, we'll set it to 0. Let's also typecast this to number, just so that it'll error out if it's not, and then if height equals 0, or if height equals 0 and width equals 0, we'll return an error. Other situations, you know, if height is less than 0 or width is less than 0, you know, we should definitely return an error there. And to prevent us from allowing people to send huge images that we'll have to process, we can limit that. So let's just let's just set a max dimension to 2048. You know, and if anything is greater than this, we will just say no thank you. And if there's no image, we'll return an error too. That's important. You need the image to do this whole thing. So we have this parseParams. Let's log params and see what comes out of it. We can even just put params in the response and see what happens. We're refreshing, of course, object. The log is more, it makes more sense. The log here, you see the image, height, and width broken out, the parameters in an object. It's way more useful than this output. So it looks like it works. Let's add a little bit of error handling here because we do return strings. if there's an error. So let's just check what the response. Let's just check what params is, and if it's a string, we will return a 400 or 4,000, depending on, you know, whatever. Okay, so 400 is good. Return 400. So now we're able to accept the parameters, able to parse them, and now we can move on to checking the parameters before we actually make the transformation. So the next section after this is to parse the media type. That's right. We need to make sure the image is the right media type before we can apply the transformations in ImageMagick. And it's really easy to do this with Deno because we have a library that does this in our standard library. We have a thing for it, and it is parseMediaType from, and we can just look this up too because I always forget where it is. All right. Documentation. Oh yeah, media types. So this is a utility function for media types, and the thing that we are looking for is this function parseMediaType. Basically, this function is just going to look at the path, the string. Look at this example. Yeah, so it accepts like, application/JSON. It accepts encoding things, and however you're going to use it is we're basically going to, we can just take this, just copy this guy, put it right here. Okay, we should make this consistent. So parseMediaType, and yes, this next section basically will have to basically check the media type and also get the image based on the path as a array buffer, which is like, the way that we can get the file, the actual image. So let's start another function, get remote image, and in here we can just fetch the image. The image is a URL, so we can just fetch it. And what we do, we want to return two things. We want to return the buffer, which is going to be the actual data of the image that will become the image, and then we will also return the media type. And we need the media type to be returned because we will pass it in our final response in the API. So let's see if we can do anything here. Basically, the way we want to use this new function is remote image equals await get remote image params image, which is a path to which is the URL to the image. So we can fetch image, and the first thing we do whenever we do fetch is we have to check if the request is fine, is cool, So first thing we'll do is check OK, and if it's not, we'll return a string, which means an error happened. All right. This is very standard, very normal pattern to do this. And then next thing is we'll have to check the media type, or we'll have to parse the media type, and then we have to check it. We have to just parse it first, and we can do that with do that with this, which is the function that we imported, and we use the headers to get the content type. And because parseMediaType is going to return like an array, right? Let's look at this. Basically, you can see it returns an array of different things. The thing that we care most about is the first response, which means we will just take 0. And if you're curious, we can just why don't we console log source res headers, and then we'll console log media type, just so we can see what it's returning. Oh, we didn't even call the thing. Here we go. Let me redeploy this and we can run it. So I'm going to run this API again, and you can see here in the logs, right, we have the headers. Let me see if I can open this up more. Or not, I guess not. We can see the headers. You can see and this is the media type that was parsed. You see that there's two entries in an array, and we really just want the first one, image JPEG. So we will add the 0 here, and get rid of these console logs. And here we'll have to add a little check, because we only want to continue with the transformation if it's an image. So, this is an image / whatever. We don't care what the extension is as long as the first part says image. So we'll split it on the \, take the first element, and if it's not equal to image, then we'll return a string that is an error. URL is not an image type. Then we can finish with our return, and our buffer is going to be a uint8 array, and we can return that just like this, which is nice. It's convenient because source res, is going to have this way to access the image file as an array buffer, which we want, and media type. So now, when we run this function, the return object is going to be buffer media type, which we will then use for the remainder of the function. So once we have this, let's just console log remote image and see what the log says. And the next step after this is going to be actually doing the image transformation with ImageMagick. That's the next step. So as soon as this is ready, let's run this and see. Yep, here we go. So you can see, I ran it twice by accident, but you can see the first buffer is just this array, and then the media type is what we got from parseMediaType. So the next step after this is to do the actual image transformation. And this is where we will use the ImageMagick client library. And the first thing that we'll do here is basically Before we jump into that, we do have to do some very preliminary error handling in the same pattern as we did before with remote image. So if remote image is a string, if type of remote image is a string, then we will return a response remote image status 400. And then the next step after we do that is we can actually start with the image transformation. And the way we want to use this next function, something like this, right? We want this next function to basically take the image buffer as well as the parameters, because we have to use those parameters to apply them to the image. And how we will return it is basically with a response like this, modified image, which is the final image. And for the response to work, we need to set the headers properly with the content type. Now, we got the content type from getRemoteImage, so basically this is just remoteImage.mediaType. Get rid of this. So that is basically how the serve function is going to end. And now we just need to define modified image. So modified image is going to be an asynchronous function. We'll do async function. Actually, it's going to be a synchronous function because there's going to be promises, but it's written in a way where we don't need a wait. We can just pass around the promise. So the parameters for this we defined earlier is going to be image buffer, which is a uint array, and params. And we can define the types here. They're all going to be numbers, except for, we'll just do numbers right now. They're all going to be numbers, width and height. And then we can, this looks right? Yeah, modify image. And then before we can the way that the ImageMagick client library works is that, we can even just look at it right here, is that we can't really pass the parameters directly. We'll have to create a options object basically, and we pass it through an options object. And we do that with magic geometry. So we'll create a new magic geometry object or instance with params width and params height, and we'll set that to sizing data. And sizing data is going to be the actual thing that we'll use to transform the image. So one more thing that we'll have to update with sizing data is the ignore aspect ratio property, and we'll only set this to true if params height is greater than 0 and params width is greater than 0. So ignore aspect ratio basically means that you can transform the image without keeping the width and height ratio the same. And if both height and width are positive numbers, then we'll ignore aspect ratio. But for example, if the request only has height or only has width, then we'll transform the image while maintaining the aspect ratio. Once we have those two things, we can just return the whole thing like this, and we're basically going to return a promise, and in the promise we will finally call image magic, and image magic is going to read the image as a buffer, and once it's done reading the image, it's going to resize it with the resizing data, and for it to for us to be able to return it back, it has to write it. And because it's a promise, we have to resolve the data here, which means down here when we do the promise, the return, modified image is actually going to be a promise. So we'll have to await modified image or to be able to get the transformed image. Is that right? I think that's right. Let's see if this works. So basically, that's this entire function. Let's return the modified image. So let's see if this works. We'll save it, and we can try it with this request. All right, I'm running the thing, and there we go. So basically, we have this image that is, like wide. It's like a wide image. It's like I don't know the aspect ratio, but it's like a postcard or something. And here we basically turned it into a 500 square, and it looks like it works. So that's great. And if there's anything, this is basically extremely simple API that just resizes images, and there's really not much else that this does, but it's cool that it's all in one file, and it does some basic operations. In the blog post, we talk also about cropping images, and this is a pretty simple functionality that we can also include. So let's go ahead and add that. The main idea behind cropping images is just that we'll have to accept a new parameter, a new querystring parameter, which is mode. And then if we detect, and then we also have to check what the mode is, if it's resizing or if it's a crop. And based on that, we will apply the necessary transformation with image magic. So let's go ahead and try that. To add the mode parameter, we'll go to parse params function, and in here basically we'll just have to add another line that's just like, what is the mode of the, does a mode parameter exist in the query string? So let's just add that. Here we go. Basically, we're going to see if mode exists. If it doesn't exist, we'll just default to resize as the default mode for this API. And then, if mode does not equal resize, and mode does not equal crop, then let's return an error. And then we can also return mode in our return object. There we go. So that's pretty simple. Just make sure everything's correct. Seems pretty straightforward so far. And then the only other thing we'll have to do is in the modify image function. Basically, we'll just have to add a sort of conditional to check what the mode is before deciding what image magic function or method to use. So we'll have to include mode in the params typing. And we can use implicit types right here, so we know like the mode has to either be resize or crop. And then in the actual read, ImageMagick.read, we will check what the mode is. So if it's resize it, else we will crop it, and I think that is it. Let's save it and run it and see if we can crop it. And to crop, it's pretty simple. We'll just have to add a mode. So let's just try, I'm going to do this 100, and we'll just try, yep, that works. Basically just cropped I'm guessing this is the upper left corner of the image. Let's see, let's do 500. Yeah, there we go. So this is the top, I think it's the top left of the image. Let's just take a look at the image. It's like this section right here. So basically we're just taking the 500 pixels of the top left corner of the original image. Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's cool. So that works. And the best thing is that we're doing this. We're editing the code right in this Deno deploy playground, which means that this entire API is hosted globally at the edge, and any edits we make is going to be reflected on the edge. And yeah, it's a very easy way to like play around with code and just like make changes and see it reflected live in production. So all right, so let me just this. Yeah, and if what's cool also is that you can take this URL and you can just give it to someone or just access it like outside the playground, and you should be able to see your transformed image through that. So that was a video walkthrough of how to create a image resizing API. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments, and if you have anything that you want us to cover, also leave that in the comments. I do read them. I read every single comment, even the bad ones. It's fine. Yeah, if you want in-depth technical help, we have a Discord. Join the Discord. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of people in there. We're always talking about web development, things like that. All right, thanks so much.